So my name is Omkar, and I've been working for the last 24 hours on coming up with a way of implementing a secure and fast peer-to-peer MMO RPG. And the reasons why I want to do this are fairly straightforward. So there are two kinds of open source MMO developers. They're either bankrupt, like Rhizome, or they're not quite fully open source. Because the main problem is that the MMOs by and large are sort of these large-scale server-client systems, and the reason for that is players can cheat quite easily in multiplayer settings, and if you allow players to go peer-to-peer, what ends up happening is that they can change the instance, they can change what sort of items they get, and you run into all sorts of chaos. So peer-to-peer is an excellent way of solving the cost problem if we can fix speed and security. So the regular blockchain unfortunately doesn't really work. And the reason for that is you've got this sort of linear scale, and you have sort of external miners in the system who basically they dig out your hash that allows you to continue the chain. And the problem with this is miners are sort of selective on which transactions they're willing to mine. And because of this, if you look at Bitcoin, there are lots of transactions that are sort of backlogged because miners don't want to do them. And second, the delays are very large. So the solution to this is this topological thing called the tangle. And the way in which it works is it's still a sort of blockchain, except it's in the form of a directed acyclic graph. So it's not quite a chain, but it's called that. So it's directed because if we know all of these nodes, we can uniquely figure out everything in the system. And there's actually one cryptocurrency that uses it. It's called IOTA, but it's not all that popular right now. So my basic algorithm is, the main server, starts with say at the beginning of each day, it hashes the item and monster database, and each local instance server, in this case it's just players with somewhat decent machines, at the beginning of each day they grab this hash database, and each time a player enters a dungeon, they ping this local server. And this local server then responds with an item and monster hash, which contain information of what items and what monsters are in the dungeon. And then the player computes the instance hash following some sort of proof of work. And each time a player computes this hash is verified by another player entering another instance. And this is chosen at random. So even if you control one side of the of your network, in the sense you've got a lot of friends entering the instance with you, you can't effectively change things because it chooses people at random. And to keep things consistent, each player entering an instance has to verify two other hashes. So the ideal way of showing this would be with a full MMO. Unfortunately, I don't have a full MMO, but I have the next best thing, which is this. So it's a basic top-down RPG that I wrote in about 10 minutes. And so what this RPG is doing is it's actually pinging this server that I've set up. And let's say that we're another player, right, who's going to check this guy to make sure that he's not doing anything wrong. So initially when the instance was created, let's assume that we're going into another instance. And we check this, everything's fine, he can go about his business. Now let's say that he cheats a little bit. And he enters this sort of funny hash, which contains items that are, way too high for his level. Now we check again, and hopefully it points out that he's a cheat. And so the thing is, this is obviously a very simple example, but you can actually scale this to pretty much anything. And now that we're going in the direction of Internet of Things, this sort of blockchain structure actually allows you to make sort of similar transactions, not necessarily financial, but similar information transactions with objects that may not have the same amount of memory. Because unlike a blockchain, you don't need a lot of memory to compute each of these proof of work transactions, and there's no wait time or transaction fees, because each time you encode one of your own hashes, you have to decode two other people's hashes. So since everybody does that, it's it sort of expands very nicely. So that was basically my presentation, and yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'm very happy to answer. Yes.
side, does a player like inject code
Yeah,
into the server?
So the problem with a peer-to-peer network is that you depend on the player to tell you what he's looking at, because you're not constantly checking back with the server. So what can happen is that if a player is sort of okay with scripting, he can send a false packet to the server, and that false packet might contain, say, items that are way beyond his level, or it artificially reduces the level of the monsters and so on. So an easy way to fix this is, first of all, you hash all of these things, so it's very hard to actually change that consistently. But even if he does one of those things, because you have multiple people checking you at the same time, when you do this without having the large-scale server, you can still figure out if he's doing something fishy. Yep.
So the main use case would be like an anti-cheat mechanism?
Actually, the thing is, this specific network that I've shown you, it actually exists as a cryptocurrency in the real world. It's called IOTA, and so the attractive thing about this network is that you can use it for pretty much anything, because you don't need a lot of memory to sort of mine the transaction, so to speak, and there's no real wait time. So and you're not paying the miners anything. So essentially, you can actually send 1 penny using this sort of scheme, and the other guy will receive 1 penny. You don't have to pay anyone in the middle. So in that sense, it's a really attractive scheme. Yep. Yeah, let's go.
So with the idea being if you're building an open source MMO, this being the base layer network where basically you have the MMO itself, and I can use, for example, like Unity on top of it to build the overall graphical user interface and experience for the players, and this would make sure that communication to the players actually happen in a proper, trustworthy way. Is that kind of concept?
That's mostly it. So basically, the graphics level stuff. We're assuming that the player's computer meets the system requirements. So even in, say, World of Warcraft, right, the local graphics is still done by the player's machine. The difference here is that your main server isn't really doing all that much work. So for instance, if I go back to my slide, you can see that there are only 2 main transactions, right? So the main server, first of all, it hashes the database in the morning, and then each local server, let's say you choose 1,000 of them at random, right? They still interact with you once a day. And I think Amazon's free tier hosting service can take up to 200,000 requests a month. So even if you have this, it's either in the free tier or it's extremely inexpensive. So what this means is if you're a developer making an open source MMO, you don't have to put a lot of capital into just setting up your infrastructure. Yep.
What's the, in your mind, the biggest leap of faith or the biggest difficulty you'd run into continuing on from here?
So the biggest problem is actually, this sort of system, it works really well when you have lots of people in your system. So if you have, say, thousands of people, the Markov chain chooses people exactly at random and so on. But I had to sort of approximate, for this demonstration at least, with 5-10 people, and sort of, massaging the system to make sure that it actually worked. That I thought was pretty hard. And the sort of building the network itself, that wasn't too difficult, simply because it's fairly straightforward linked list. Yep.
So I just started to think about, like, if the game gets really popular, wouldn't that cause like a large chain load where it would be hard to play the game, because then the train, like, there would be this congestion. Or you're saying that the IOTA format of the nodes would help reduce that to where like you could keep playing the game even though there's a bunch of transactions going on all at the network at once.
I'll actually show you my code because I think there's a really nice explanation to this. Okay, so this is typically called the main game loop. So this is all the graphics that are showing on here, and basically this little bit over here. I've put it like this. In the real game, you obviously encrypt it much better. But the thing is, each of these checks, each of these communications with the server, they only happen once every latency time, basically. So you don't have to communicate every single second with the server. You can communicate, say, once. In this case, I'm communicating once every 5 seconds with the server. So what that means is you can actually be raiding a dungeon, and at the same time, you can send off a packet and wait for a response. So what that means is even if your network is humongous, you never run into the problem where You're just waiting for someone else to respond.
Right. Have you heard of Mimblewimble?
Say again?
Have you heard of Mimblewimble?
No, I haven't.
Just similarly to IOTA, as a way to keep the chain flow down.
Right.
Look into that.
Yep. Yeah.
Just a clarification and a question.
Mhm.
Are there any transaction fees?
None at all.
Zero.
Zero.
And what's the smallest increment of payment made?
That actually depends on the system. I think in IOTA you can go all the way down to a tenth of a penny, if I remember correctly. So it's 0.0010, $0.001 that you can send.
Oh, okay.
That's actually the example that they give. I'm not sure if that's their benchmark, but theoretically there's no transaction fees involved at all. Yep.
I have like just a surface level understanding of like acyclic directed graphs and tangle networks. It seems as though it relies heavily on participants, right? This may be a pain point or not for IOTA as well.
Right.
So it requires a lot of other nodes to be able to confirm quickly.
Right.
So that's
So there's actually, I mean, IOTA itself has this sort of training wheel mechanism where they actually have a master server until they get enough people in the system to combat that specific problem. But in this case, because everything's happening in the background, it doesn't matter if the latency time is even 10 seconds. Because you know, once you've sent off your instance request, you can start raiding your dungeon, on your own machine, basically. And you can wait for the server to do that computation, however long it takes, and then get back to you. So even if you're cheating, you'll just be further into the instance before you get caught.
and it would just send you back to
Right.
where you-
Yeah.
Cool.
Any other questions? Yeah. I think.
It's not over. I want to ask a question. Or we can go. It's fine. What do you think is like the most important takeaway from like the whole MMO like challenge you set out on? Like
So I think the main thing, as in the commonality between the MMO and say cryptocurrency is the fact that you can set up a system without putting any capital into getting the infrastructure up. So even if you have a large scale cryptocurrency, you don't have to do anything to set up your system because you're basically relying on the participants to share the load basically. So you can get things started without a lot of capital.
follow-up question.
Yep.
Why?
Because when you design this network, as I showed in that, so basically you're not doing a lot of requests to the main server, and usually the cost of your server depends on how many requests you send it and how many times it has to respond. So if you're not responding very much, you can usually get away with not having as powerful a server. So and usually the server is the biggest cost in any of these systems. So in that sense, it makes things much easier.
Well, thank you.
All right, so what we've been working on this weekend, researching and validating, is a new kind of index for categorizing coins and supplying information on them. And what we found in the current landscape of products that are similar to this are obviously things like CoinMarketCap, which supply a lot of metrics that go into any kind of security or financial instrument. And the reality is with cryptocurrencies, a lot of it is speculative. And a tool like CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko is lacking the real information that's really causing shifts in coin prices. So what we're focusing on with CoinByte is community sizes and news pieces and also developer activity when it comes to coins. So it may be hard to see, but on each of these cards, this is the main dashboard. You have things like Reddit subscribers and the change in that, with also the change in price above that, so you can see the correlation. And then also the same goes for Twitter, Facebook likes, and stars on GitHub. And by clicking on one of the cards, you'll get an expanded view where you can see all, it may be hard to see, but you can see the different tabs for the different areas that we're covering. Same with Twitter, GitHub, Reddit, and tracking all that information and finding the correlation between a news piece that's maybe positive or negative going out to the size of their community. It could give investors insight into how a coin's price will change, rather than just the information that's just market cap or 24-hour shift. And so we've been validating this weekend, and these are the designs and interface that we came up with. We really try to focus on the UX and UI simply because CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko and other similar tools, they really lack that, and they focus more on getting a critical mass of users and traffic to their website, because their main model is on-site ads, while this will be a SaaS product. And the team is myself, Keegan, and Keaton over here. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
So the index information on there said Facebook likes and Twitter followers. Like, do you know, like, as far as which Twitter followers and Facebook likes, like, towards which groups and which individuals, like, who's picking that? Like, is this like a DAO idea, like a distributed autonomous organization, or is this like a company that sort of picks those, and then y'all set that, and then just let that algorithm move out?
Yeah, so it would be tracking things like the Ethereum subreddit and seeing the activity in there. So that would vary by the coin. And the same goes for the Facebook page, and then GitHub is pretty straightforward.
I'm just thinking, like, Reddit, like the Litecoin subreddit. A bunch of people post in there, but if Kava reposts is like, if Charlie reposts, that's the most important.
Yeah.
So, like, who's picking the importance parts as far as, like, it's important that this like happens?
Yeah,
It's
no.
important that that thing happens.
That's something we thought about too, is like weighing influencers more. Like if they're putting a lot of work into a coin, then that'd be a high indicator that it's just a green light, that there'll be more movement happening in that area. But yeah, totally.
So specifics like that, it's like, I guess you'd have to have like people really narrowing in on that. But it's really interesting because, yeah, there's not much text going on. That's interesting.
Yep.
So you were saying you were planning on avoiding like advertisements. What kind of business model would you guys use?
Yeah. So this will be a SaaS product, probably like a multi-tiered system of pricing. Things like this type of data would probably come at one of the premium memberships, and then another stage beyond that would be something like sentiment analysis that analyzes news pieces and tweets that are going out in that area. Yeah.
Are you planning on assigning cryptocurrencies like a score based on like their developer activity and traffic, kind of like CoinGecko, or is it just for?
Yeah, so we've thought about custom metrics, and there's a few that we want to make that we're still deciding on. Because one of the things that we found with CoinGecko when we were doing our research was that theirs is out of like a percentage. For some reason, it's kind of unclear as to what that means. Like they'll give you a developer activity percentage. And so trying to make really transparent metrics for the community is what we're going after. That also plays into the whole UX too. Yeah.
Tell me about a challenge that you encountered after you began that you didn't expect.
Yeah, so obviously this will be a lot of data collection. And so by changing the UI, we were able to get around that by kind of just having expanded cards rather than full pages for each one. And then also another feature is you may be able to see the pins in each of the top left corners of the cards, and that allows investors to save the cards that they find most promising. And then also these badges, these are notifications that alert you of things like the highest developer activity in the past 24 hours, fastest growing community, and then things like biggest movers in price. Yeah.
You mentioned like weighing positive and negative news articles for a coin. How are you weighing that? How do you determine what's a positive or a negative news article?
Yeah, so we're still exploring that, and there's a few machine learning tools that can help analyze that. Just sentiment analysis isn't something that's like very new, honestly. Like it's been used before, and we're still figuring out ways to implement that. Yeah.
One more question. Have you heard of Spacesuit X?
Spacesuit
It's
X?
an acronym for basically like what you're doing here as far as like different measures of a point that you should be looking at when looking at one of these coins. And I'm just thinking like you might want to take a look at it because they have a lot of good points in there to follow and monitoring. I haven't really looked at what all y'all are monitoring and they're monitoring, but I like what they're doing, and I like what you're doing here because, like you're saying, market cap is really so. Take a look at that. Spacesuit X.
Yeah, Spacesuit X. Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
It's just an acronym of what to look for.
Yeah, we'll check it out. Thank you.
Since
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, so just curious while we're setting up, is anyone nervous about their taxes this year? Maybe raise their hands. Did anyone just kind of space?
Well, you should be.
Yeah, you know, all joking aside, crypto taxes are hard. You know, there's not a lot of readily available information that helps young investors figure out how to go about reporting their gains and losses. And it can definitely be a daunting challenge. So we set out this hackathon to really make that process a little bit more user-friendly. And with that, we created BlockTax. So just to give you a quick demo, what BlockTax allows you to do is actually automatically import your trading history from any of the exchanges you use. For demo purposes, we integrated with the Binance exchange, which allows you to generate read-only API keys. So you don't have to worry about anyone stealing these keys and executing trades or withdrawing your money. So you just take those keys that are generated, and BlockTax will grab all of your trades. Additionally, if you don't want to do that, or if your exchange doesn't support these API keys, you can manually put in your trades. So if you bought some Bitcoin, maybe 10 of them for some US dollars, maybe $1,000 worth, when Bitcoin cost $100 on March 4th, you know, you can add trades like that. And BlockTax will factor that into the way it comes up with your tax information. You know, the other piece that's important is actually figuring out what your tax bracket is. So BlockTax allows you to do that. So yeah, we really tried to make it easy and informative. This output you see here is actually very similar to one of the tax forms that you would use for reporting your crypto gains and losses, form 8949. So yeah, we generate a description of each asset that you made a gain or loss on. And do some really cool first in, first out calculations there that we can talk a little bit more about to figure out what your total gains and loss are. Yeah, one of the interesting things about crypto and taxes is that depending on how long you held your cryptocurrency before selling it and having that taxable event, you can have either short-term gains, which are taxed like ordinary income tax, or long-term gains, which are taxed as capital gains. Yeah, just tried to make it easy. You know, you can download a CSV with this information, and that's sort of an overview of our UI that we built. Turn it over to you guys to talk a little bit more about the tech behind our algorithm.
Yeah, so I think one of the main things is if you've ever done day trading or any sort of high frequency trading, it's a nightmare when you go to do your taxes because you have to record every single lot that you bought and sold. So say you bought, you know, 1 Bitcoin and then you shift that over to another exchange and you buy 100 Ripple and you buy 100 IOTA, you buy a lot of things with that. You have to record every single combination of the transaction that you bought originally at, say, Coinbase to onboard your fiat, and every single transaction that you sold on the altcoin exchange, as well as you have to deal with lots. So to net that out, you know, basically it's like say I bought one ripple every first of the month of every, or the first of the month every month for a year. I have 12 ripple with different purchase dates and different prices that are my cost basis. And then say I sell, a year later I sell 12 ripple at one time. We figured out how to kind of set up separate ledgers to be able to match those transactions so that all of those get, first of all, categorized as short-term or long-term based on when you actually bought the individual lots, and then also the gains and the USD prices pegged to Bitcoin prices at both when you bought and when you sold, and use that as the delta to kind of calculate your gains. So, and we've been audited by the accounting firm of Trace and Trace. He came by and like really pegged us, and he presented yesterday on doing crypto taxes along with Lane, and we kind of went through it. And I think at first blush, you know, like I think we had a pretty good approach to doing it, so that you could get a really reasonable thing. We didn't do fees, so that could be easily added, but just for the hackathon, we just wanted to get like, we didn't factor in fees that the exchanges may factor in, but to get our full profit, and then we could report by the year. So what Jared showed was the end of year report for say 2017, and then a lot of times your accountant will have an ability to import an Excel file so that they don't have to hand code in every single transaction, because I've had to do that before where I had hundreds of transactions and I had to pay somebody at my accounting firm to hand key that off of a printed document from Schwab. And that's just like a tremendous waste of money, time, and effort. So it really kind of solves that piece there, because it's in the exact format of the Form 8942 that they have to fill out anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge time save. I mean, that's pretty much what we're going for. And I mean, most of you guys, I'm sure, have used some exchange, and like, I'm sure if you're like me, you bought some random stuff at some point, you didn't really keep track of it by any means. It's like, toss in your keys. I mean, we look to support Bittrex and some other verticals that we can definitely do. This is just kind of what we did for this period of time. It's like, come toss in all your keys, and like, you don't need to know anything. We'll go grab everything for you. You slap all that stuff on your form and you walk away. Well,
and that's the other key thing too, is like you might have transferred part of what you bought on Coinbase to exchange A, and then you bought Ripple, and you send part of it to exchange B, and you bought something else with it. Like, our concept for the next kind of build out is to have one API that basically can talk to all the different exchanges that can get that data using something called GraphQL, which allows you to have instead of a REST endpoint, you have one endpoint, and you get to define what your data model is, which is what we need to produce as the accounting output. And then you just create mapping to everybody's REST API, and you don't have to deal with a lot of boilerplate code to deal with that. You can use GraphQL to do that. Yeah.
So you're saying you determine the USD value by the BTC value of the token?
Yeah.
Where do you get that historical Bitcoin value?
So we went to GDAX to do that, and then we also figured out what is the Satoshi value. So we pegged it to Satoshis against the dollar whenever you buy and whenever you sell, and that's what we use as the calculation point.
Is Coinbase's
determine the buy of the original currency and the sell of the shape-shifting currency, and determine the tax difference between that.
It's like really weird because now you're
Yeah, actually.
there are some possible blinds.
Yeah, the one thing with Shapeshift, because they don't record any of that transaction information, so there's after the transaction commit. My understanding of Shapeshift is once the transaction commits, it's
actually every historical transaction is available through the API.
Oh, at Shapeshift?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, so then we would just.
But it's only by address. It's not like tied to an identity.
Right. Okay. So theoretically, we didn't build that piece, but yeah, I guess you could write an algorithm to do that piece to say, okay, what are all the addresses that I use to do trading on Shapeshift, and then pull in those transactions. And once again, it's just a different way to call it, and then you still are recording in two different ledgers, the buy and the sell side.
Do you have plans for block tax to also do debits and credits? Because there's like way more, well, in my opinion, there's more information like when you do debits and credits to other parts of the financial statements. Because like depending on the classification, like if you consider cryptocurrency, depending on jurisdiction, a security, or you consider it a commodity or a currency, it flows through the different statements differently. So it's like a security, short term on my balance sheet. When I have unrealized holding gains and losses, like trading security, flows through the income statement as ordinary expenses in my daily business as I'm selling a firm. Versus like if I did long term, if it was available for sale as a security on my balance sheet, it's going to go through the statement of comprehensive income, and then when it finally actually gets sold for like US dollars or something, then finally hits the income statement. So are you guys trying to implement how each individual transaction hits each part of the statement?
Well, so this is kind of what we talked to you about, right? This, I mean, we didn't add that level of complexity.
No, I'm not saying that you did. I'm saying is that a plan?
Is that a plan?
Yeah.
I feel like we're kind of focused, like our original focus at least was just on like this like specific tax form even. So I feel like we would probably integrate other things before that, but I mean it's something interesting to look into. And like I'd be interested in looking, like I think that'd be valuable.
And honestly, just to wrap up and take a page from your talk earlier yesterday, 100 people out of the last 250,000 people that have reported their taxes reported on crypto gains and losses, and it really that highlights so well that there's such a problem here. And so any steps we can make to making it a little bit easier for people to understand and use. We'd love to make this steps. Yeah. Anybody else?
All right. So to kind of start off, we came into the conference with an idea to combat police brutality, but when we got here, we had to provide government IDs to sign into the conference and register. So we viewed this as an essential kind of problem on a grander scale of blockchain hackathons and conferences. So I'll let you kind of take the lead here.
Yeah, so we just basically think that blockchain hackathons should incorporate the blockchain for one, and also set an example for privacy-minded sort of protocols. And so, like the current form for the registration for this hackathon included mandatory personal identifying information, and we I guess the point is to not have a trusted third party. As Nick Zavo said, trusted third parties are security holes.
So, thus, we created FUBAR, which is a recursive acronym for FUBAR, the Universal Blockchain Anonymous Registration.
This is just a bunch of buzzwords for what it is, but mainly it's trustless, that is true. It's secure, anonymous-ish, blockchain, sovereign, free, decentralized, crypto cloud, that's not a real thing, autonomous.
We wanted to throw as many blockchain key terms in there as we could. So some of the key features of FUBAR is you can have a configurable registration form, so you can add fields that may be pertinent to a conference. One idea might be if you want to include, say, like a business card sort of thing. Colorado Blockchain Summit, or Global Blockchain Summit did this last year, where there's a QR code on your badge that could be scanned, and that was essentially your business card that allowed people to know who you are and find you. So you could include that in your profile, or it's also optional.
Another one that we had to add for our example was a date of birth field, because for this hackathon, for example, that was a mandatory requirement that you're over 18. So that's just optional, like for your specific hackathon.
So we're using MetaMask to interact with the front-end application. And upon registration, you're issued an ERC 721 token, which is your event ticket. We called our token FOOBs, yeah, for food bar. And when you check in, you can provide your QR code that essentially burns the ticket and allows you entrance to the event. And something to be noted, so there's a capacity to an event, so there's going to be 100 tokens out there. Say I'm not able to make it, I can cancel my registration, which burns the token and allows the capacity to be raised by that one and allows someone else to register.
No, you.
Okay, so some future ideas, because we were only able to implement so much in 24 hours. And we just got a basic registration implementation that I'll demo in a second. But we want to integrate a grander, maybe like a decentralized autonomous organization sort of thing. So you'll have speakers submit presentations, and also to kind of backpedal a little bit, when you register, you're also issued a second set of tokens, ERC 20 tokens, comparable to Buffacoin, where you can go and vote on or assign a certain amount of your tokens as a weight to presentations that you would want to see. And that would allow a decentralized presentation selection process. Some other features that the current hackathon software implements is automated IRC Riot Matrix invites or Slack invites upon registration. If you provide your email, you'll get email verification plus updates regarding the conference. And another thing we wanted to implement that I just learned about at the recent Ethereum Denver meetup was implementing various role and permission levels, such as an admin, organizer, volunteer, hacker, etc. So, with no further ado, we'll bust straight into a demo. So you'll see at first, I'm not logged into MetaMask, and it's telling me to do so. So, thankfully, I have MetaMask set up here, and I'm on my private network, running Ganache. And now, it's like, hey, you're here, so let's get you registered. I'm just going to throw in some test information, set my birth date for at least 18 years old, and you can see here that it already pulls in my wallet address using the Web3 JS framework. And then and another thing to note is these links over here will be dashboard links, and they'll vary depending upon the user role. Admins will see presentations and other various things. And then once you submit, it looks like that. And it says, thanks for registering. You'll see your ticket in moments. You'll see it come into your MetaMask wallet. You also, if you provide an email, you'll receive an email with further information. You might need the contract address to add it to your MetaMask wallet as a token. And I think it's the last bit. And so this is kind of how we tackled the various aspects of the hackathon. So technicality, creating an ERC 721 contract was surprisingly more difficult than I thought it would be. Especially at ETH Denver, I saw a presentation where she made it seem like it was no problem. You could have an ERC 721 in minutes, which wasn't my case. So that was the majority where I spent my time. And then once I got the 721 contract deployed, which we can see here, we can see the contract creation. I wasn't able to really get Web3.js to invoke contract functions to issue the ERC 721 upon registration. So that's kind of a future implementation thing. Do you want to talk about it? Yeah.
So we drew inspiration from Colorado Coin in the sense that that is I guess that was an ERC 20 coin, and so was Buffy Coin. but with Colorado Coin, it was used for meals from the food trucks at East Denver, and now it just doesn't have any value. I'm not really sure what they're planning to do with it.
Next
but
East Denver, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it was a cool idea, and we definitely drew inspiration from that. And also Buffett Coin, even though we haven't implemented that, but Tommy explained what we want to do with that.
And kind of combining those two and an amalgam to make a new sort of greater thing. And so this is useful for any hackathon coming up, especially blockchain-oriented hackathons. Part of our design, did I skip through Fubi? Part of our design process was creating our mascot, which is a
pangolin?
A pangolin, closely representing the Mozilla Dragon for free Libre open source software. And this allows for self-sovereignty, more control of your personal information and security of your personal information. Questions? Oh, is that straightforward? Awesome.
Yeah, so on the registration, do you create an account that you can log into?
It's going to be directly tied to your MetaMask
Okay, so
ID,
it's based on
your
address.
contract or your wallet address.
And then
but then you'll be able to go back, as long as you're logged into MetaMask, that information will be tied into various blockchain
So are you
things.
saving the information like date of birth, name, all of that somewhere yourself, or is that entered every time?
It's in the ERC 721 contract.
Yeah, we were kind of attaching that to the event ticket specifically because it was only necessary for getting into the event, and that way it's burned and can go away. Yeah.
You mentioned using this to protect against police brutality. How would you?
That was our original idea. There's this app called Mobile Justice, and we were going to try to put that on the blockchain using IPFS. But then we decided to go with this for some reason.
Well, yeah, an unnamed participant in this crowd persuaded us.
Yeah, he's super anonymous mystery team member.
But next hackathon, we're gonna probably go more towards the police brutality.
Yeah.
Did you look at Uport or anything like that?
Absolutely. The consensus that we really came down to is that things like Uport and Civil are useful on a grander scale. Like governments are using them to issue citizenship on the blockchain, and that's how they define identity. Other than that, it's kind of hard to, rely on Uport for identity, right? To be totally accurate, say. It pulls from various spaces of the interwebs, but say a person like me, I don't have Facebook, I don't have a lot of presence on the internet, so it would be hard for Uport to kind of verify that, and the extra level of complexity didn't seem that necessary. We were specifically looking at if it could help with proving age verification, and that just wasn't the case.
Yeah, we didn't find anything really for that.
Beyond that, it didn't seem extremely more useful, but I'd be interested in talking more about how it could be.
The way Tommy made that date of birth thing, it's just trusting you to give your real date of birth, really, so it's not official at all.
I guess it takes the liability off the conference person. It's like, hey, you told me you're 18.
You can also add a user agreement, right?
Yeah, terms of service saying you click this checkbox, you're saying that's truth. So, Duke.
Who owns the identity? The participant or the conference?
The participant. It's their wallet that everything is kind of maintained in. They receive the ERC 721 token, so they're the one that's in control of the event ticket, and they're also the ones, when you go to burn it, that's all just happening in your wallet, and then it evaporates into the ether.
And then,
so the way that Colorado Coin did it is they also sent over a small amount of ether, to allow transactions to be viable without a person having to have their own wallet making these like transactions, and they have to obtain Ether to. So we send over like a faucet amount of Ether with all of this to allow them to make these transactions.
Also, it's configurable, like, in the sense that the registration form could be super anonymous and just ask for, like, a nickname or, like, nothing at all.
Right. Just your wallet, I guess. Yes?
Sorry, I stepped out for just a second, maybe answer this. Is like the main use case really just to keep your information private whenever you're purchasing tickets? Is that the main thing you're doing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
registering for a hackathon in this specific case, but it could be applied to other sort of registration.
Yeah, and to that point, there is kind of like other event registration things out there. One that comes to mind is BlockTix. And discussion about this has been open since even before ETH Denver, and then past ETH Denver. We kind of, this has been up in the air, like how do we do this? So when we got here, we're like, all right, yeah.
I'm just thinking if you're selling tickets in crypto, you know, one of the big problems we have right now with ticket sales is like one person's buying them and stuff and they're reselling. So I mean, if you can provide a proper fair shake towards ticketing, that sounds interesting too.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of like having the ERC 721 coin to it, is like that represents the event ticket. And as long as you're in possession of that and you have your own private keys to your wallet, you own that ticket and you can transfer that. I can transfer that to you, and it's going to be in your wallet, which you own the private keys to, and you know I'm not double selling that ticket.
But also,
you
this
have that
is geared towards like free events like this one.
Oh, absolutely, that as well. So. Cool. All right.
All right, we have one more project to present, so please welcome BitPie.
All right, hey everyone, we're BitPie. My name's Ted.
And I'm Erica Gutierrez, and we're excited to talk to you today about informed trading decisions. So, so we wanted to have a project with a purpose, and some research we did before starting our project is that only 5% of Americans, or 16.3 million people, participate in selling and trading Bitcoin, and 5% is a really small percentage, and actually of the people surveyed, most people did not have the ability to differentiate between Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, which is kind of problematic. Another statistic is that 54% of Americans do participate in regular security investments. So there is the desire for people to participate in a free market, they just don't have the knowledge about that. And finally, 76% of Americans have said themselves that they don't actually understand what Bitcoin is. So there's interest in cryptocurrencies, there's interest in making security investments, but a lot of people don't know how to make an informed decision about a cryptocurrency decision because they don't understand what it is and they don't know when would be a good time to buy or sell. So that's essentially the problem that we were focusing on. And so, I don't know if this is gonna stay on, that makes me really nervous. And so these are our goals that we based our project on. So one was simplifying decision making based on critical data points. So we wanted to make it pretty simple. Again, we are targeting people who don't want to sit there and read information about different exchanges, who aren't trolling Reddit forums. We're kind of focusing on people that have an interest in security investments. They want to change what they're putting their money in, but they don't want to spend their whole day thinking about it. So again, expanding market to traditional equity investors. And finally, one thing that we thought of is, in the beginning of cryptocurrencies, a lot of it was about infrastructure, and we moved into where we are now, which is kind of a space where people are making investments and still working in infrastructure. But we do know that eventually also will move into like a consumer market, and so we want to introduce the people that will make a consumer market for different cryptocurrencies or uses of blockchain. So this is sort of to introduce people into this arena of technology, and it's not simply just to make investment decisions in the future. So
it's equalizing in a way because people who don't have experience are able to understand like what goes behind a decision they need to make. So even if you do know kind of like what the different data models are, there's still just a huge disparity in like what the recommendations might be. For example, this is an Elliott wave prediction, which is my favorite. That kind of shows like almost like the hype circle, and that'll predict a much higher price than kind of like a traditional technical analysis, which will just track like the moving average. So even if you think like kind of the different models, it's really nice to be able to compare and see how you should make your decision. So.
You want to type as well?
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Stand by. Fingers crossed. Boom.
There we go.
Yeah, so right now there's information out there, but you have to sort through it yourself. But what if you could go through and compare your own data models? You could select if you trust the Elliott's wave analysis more than some sort of technical analysis or some sort of like news pricing formula. And not only that, but you could actually set your own decision logic. So instead of having to like log into the API and like code in exactly how you're making that decision, maybe you come up with your own trend and you can almost just drag and drop logic blocks so you can create the decision that you feel most comfortable with. So what this ends up being is you're just basically having better trading odds, so you can make more money with less risk. So this is all I've got to show you for a demo. It's just so what you're going to see here is just kind of like a snapshot view of what a user might encounter when they bring up the recent Bitcoin prices. So yeah, just a simple interactive graph. It's really important to be simple because people want to see the least information possible in order to make an informed decision. And then it gives a recommendation based on the model you chose whether or not you should buy. I'll show you later how the system's set up, but we were able to use the GDAX API and load in the prices. The connection's not there, but the core element of like logging to the GDAX API is. So I'll show you what we were able to build. Yeah, it's a web app. So it would be something like an app that would be available for people just like Coinbase. So this would be the full system flow of which we only built these two elements. That's why I showed them separately because the information is not being passed. I'll go into the challenges of why we only got this far, but essentially you log in. If you went in through a guest, you could just see the snapshot view. That communicates with the server-side GDAX API. Then you have, if you want to, you can set the decision, either custom decision logic or the model that you trust the most, and then make your buy-sell decisions. So it's a relatively simple system, but the end result is just an easy user interface for making those choices. But we had a lot of challenges. So when we were originally setting it up, we were going to use a Django server. I basically broke everything. So if anyone in here is an expert in Django, I'd love to talk to you after this. But this morning we redid it in Node.js. And yeah, I guess what we're running into is really the fact that the GDAX API is a server-side, I guess, library. And so we have to use a server. And since I broke my server, I couldn't use Django. And on Atom, I couldn't really get a server running in time. So that's why those two pieces were disconnected. But in theory, the basic code, the proof of concept is there. We just need to kind of embed it into a server so that the information can flow.
And so next we'd like to talk a little bit about monetization, because obviously if we're talking about security investments, we want to make money from that, right? And so we had three different contentions we thought of this. One would be that we would offer a trial, but instead of letting users use it for an extended time, it would just be a trial of the user going in, setting what inputs and factors are important for them making a decision, what they consider a risky or non-risky decision, and then getting to try out the buy or sell feature one time, just so they can kind of get a grasp for how that functions. We thought about potentially charging this as like a microtransaction, so maybe you pay like 1 or 5 cents for each buy-sell decision rather than paying for the data, because we do acknowledge that a lot of the information we're using is already readily available. You're just kind of paying for the curation of that information, and we don't think that's necessarily like a high cost kind of decision either. And then finally, we thought that, you know, that if we are targeting people that are traditional investors in the security market, they're used to getting detailed reports from somewhere like Charles Schwab or something like that that kind of explains to them what's going on in the market, why they should invest in certain things. And although what we were trying to create was something that's easy, drag and drop, you see limited information just based on what you customize it to be, there might be that potential that maybe someone does want to sit there and read information, but they still want it curated for them. And so we thought that it would be nice to just have a separate section that you pay for separately, completely separate from your transactions, that you can kind of see detailed reports about the same sort of information we give you at a lesser. And then future impact of what we did, expanding the cryptocurrency investment industry. Again, we did mention earlier in our presentation, we just want to get people in the market that aren't already participating. And also, again, like I mentioned earlier, facilitating the move from infrastructure and investment possibilities into other consumer products or consumer uses, because really what we're doing here might be useful for investments, but more so we think that creating other similar tools would be useful for people who don't understand this kind of infrastructure but still want to participate in this kind of technology, and that's really important to us. And then moving forward for our specific project, we would like to have it so that you can use Elliott's model or other analytical models to make your buy-sell decision. Options to customize facets that impact personal user behavior. So for one person, it might be more important to have opening and closing information for a specific currency, but other people might just want like highest and lowest during a certain time period. So it just depends on how that person wants to customize it, and it would take time to build those features out. And then finally, the expansion of timeframes in which data is collected. We did it just over the span of a day, and obviously that's not going to work for every single type of investor. So that's something we thought of automatically to edit. And so,
yeah, so we are going to take this project forward. I think we're missing like some core expertise, particularly on the back end side. So if you have any interest, write down our email. That's my email. Shoot me a note. Happy to connect. I think it's something important that's going to be done at some point. Thanks.
So is your primary target audience for this product investors, bankers, people who are already pretty financially savvy, or is it going to be farmers and truck drivers and folks who have kind of heard how great crypto is and want to get into it but don't really know what they're doing?
we talked about this a lot, and it's somewhere in between. So it might not be necessarily someone who works at Charles Schwab, but maybe someone who would hire someone who works at Charles Schwab. So people that are interested in investing their money, and maybe they have some financial background, but their technical background isn't that strong. So perhaps if it's an easy enough application to use, it would be wonderful to cater it to working moms or a young millennial who just graduated high school. But we're kind of looking for those people in between who don't necessarily want to spend more time investing, but want to invest in a different market, essentially.
Just an idea, it sounds like this is really like you just put it in and you pick a TA that you want to follow, and then it follows it. Or you can do like you're saying, you don't know that much, so you place it kind of where you want it to. It's going to tell you when to buy and sell.
Exactly.
I'm just thinking an idea of marketing this to traders, because a lot of these TA guys really like to say their stuff's the best, and they're going to prove it to you and all that stuff. Market to those guys and say, well, put your money where your mouth is, and we'll just follow it along, and you can see which ones become more profitable over time. And then the people that don't know come up and analyze that and say, well, maybe I want the Bollinger Band, or maybe I want this or that, because this seems to be doing the best. Just
good point. Yeah, you can rank the quality of people's predictions. You know, people make predictions all the time, but actually assigning a number to it would be really interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anything else? We're really excited to share this with you. Yeah?
How do you guys decide whether it's like a green flag to invest or a red flag to not?
Yeah, so I mean that depends on the technical analysis. There's some pieces that we're missing, like for example risk tolerance. Like you'd have to define like how often you want to invest, and also like what is your like total pool. So we kind of assume that they make the total pool decisions ahead of time, but there's a lot of work needs to be done. Like how do you craft that algorithm? Like how do you decide, if it's like a 95% buy or like an 85% buy? Like that'll all be defined based on like the range that technical analysis projects. So like, for example, like in an Elliott's wave, right, it's coming in and it's gonna spike, and like maybe there's like a 95% chance it spikes at a specific time. So you want to invest like before that, obviously, and then like your buy number would be based off time in that case. But it's something that's based on like a trend line. It would be more based on like how the moving average was looking projected over time. Or if you set your own logic, you could do something where it's like it needs to be below this price, but the derivative is like changing. It's like if it's going down but decreasing, right? That's two different elements of logic.
So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Alice Knog, but not known by that to many people. I'm a porn star. I work in the adult industry, and one of the largest issues in the adult industry at the moment is payment platforms don't want to work with us. Like, if you want to have a credit card process transactions on your website, you have to pay upwards of $10,000 a year. Like that's ridiculous. And I mean, there's so many we get screwed over everywhere. Like cam models get like 50% of what they earn. That's changing now with Spank Chain. I'm involved in that community heavily. I would have implemented Spank Chain, but they're not. Like their API isn't out yet. So yeah, I used coin payments for now. So the idea of this is you got these images, and they start out very, very pixelated, right? And then the more money you put into it, the less pixelated it gets until like it's like pretty visible. But like even like the last iteration is pretty pixelated. Ooh, that's giant. I mean that's not the last; it's the second to last. So. I mean, I could show you like the payment itself. It works, but I don't know if I want to stand here for 10 minutes and wait for Litecoin to confirm. With Spank, it will be instant over like Ethereum smart contracts. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but they have like a working example on their beta campsite. So. And they like I spoke to the developers and they said that it would be available within this quarter. So I mean I guess the idea here is like it's just like images, but like people will work together to make them visible, and together it crowdfunds money. So I thought this idea was pretty good. I saw something similar to it on the darknet in 2011. But like, it's just it was a terrible site. Like,
so
yeah.
It's an aggregate of all the payments that go into the image to depixelate it.
Yeah.
So like if 5 people come along and depixelate an image, I could see the progress on the image.
Yeah, definitely. So okay. Say this one. This is no one has tipped on this so far. So. The more pixelated it is, the more you have to pay to make it less pixelated. But as you're like down here, you only have to pay $1 because you can see most of it. So like say we do $9 whatever. Coin payments like locked me out because I have more than 3 unconfirmed transactions at the moment with them. I've been developing, sorry, but it works with like all these altcoins for now. But like it's just slow, and that's obviously a huge issue in the crypto community at the moment. But it'll get better. I suppose I could show you like a faster way of doing this. Let us change the database. I mean, it works with like I've tested it itself, and it definitely like as you pay, it will go lesser. It works, but yeah.
I love your idea. I was wondering, do you think that
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and you know, really the thing about that is like, who wants to watch like a 5-minute long video that looks like that? Like, it would be fun, but like I just don't know how practical it is, and this seems a lot more like, you know, what you see is what you get sort of thing, and where that's like a bit too dynamic. I feel like, if that makes sense. Yeah.
You could apply this to basically any type of content creator, right? So,
No, absolutely.
So any photographer or someone
Yeah.
who has different content. So
Yeah, I
it's
mean, it's a really simple concept. Like, I thought it would take like 3 hours, and I was working until like 11:40, like from 8 in the morning yesterday. So, but that's mostly because I was a bit distracted. But I mean, there's so many awesome people here. Yeah. You mentioned a lag in the payment system using coin payments. I'm just kind of wondering how that workflow goes. So when a payment is made, do you receive like a hook that comes back and notifies?
So, I mean, you get the hook as soon as it notices confirmations, and that takes time. And I you know, even with Litecoin, it would take like 10 minutes. And it was like, I don't know, just as I was starting to like walk up here, like I realized that I literally couldn't even make a payment at the moment because I'm locked out. But like, it works. Here, let me go to the image table and like, so say, first, oh, you know, that's in the wrong database. Let's connect. Oh, yeah, okay, I switched IPs. I'm locked out of my MySQL database. Security. Yeah?
That's good. What was the biggest technical challenge you ran into?
Honestly, like, I had a lot of issues with like just setting up Laravel properly and just doing it right. I mean, I've worked with Laravel a bit. I used to work on an MMORPG, which, I mean, I was a web developer for them, and Laravel, like, there's a reason I had to leave, because I didn't really know Laravel that well. But like, I'm like when I'm not a porn star, I'm a graphic designer, web designer. So, you know, I really focus on the front end, but like, the back end is very important too, and it's good to be full stack. Yeah.
How does your implementation differ? Like, what did you add on top of the example that you saw?
So, like, I guess the difference here is like the payment differences. I'm not exactly sure how that worked. I never like paid money to them, you know. But like, also the way it depixelates is a curve, so it's more satisfying, I guess it feels like, because if it's linear, it's very blocky up until the last payment, you know. And like there, you can see a pretty good thumbnail. It's just like size down. Yeah, and Laravel. And coin payments. I mean, the other one just used Bitcoin, which is like, I would never do that now. Yeah?
This doesn't have anything to do with this, but you were mentioning that you get charged like certain fees for creating porn.
Yeah.
Like who takes your money? Is it the
Okay, so
government
if you own a porn site and you want to accept credit cards, you know, obviously PayPal would never work with you, and pretty much every bank would never want to work with you if they knew. But so you have to work with very specific banks that work with like payment platforms that have APIs that like, it's ridiculous money. Like if you look into adult payment processing, it's just like, I know I know someone who owns a site and like literally $10,000 a year. Like it's ridiculous.
Wait, what do you mean like?
just in order to enable credit card payments.
Okay, but how much does don't regular businesses pay certain fees for like?
Yeah, but not that much money. Like any regular business could use like I don't know, PayPal or like what's Shopify, you know? But you can't do that.
So like Wells Fargo refuses or
Absolutely. None of the banks want to be affiliated with this industry. And so I feel like crypto is a great application to like remove discrimination in general. Yeah. What was I had something in mind. I don't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like this idea. It sounds like the main use case you're saying here is to reward content providers that are creating these images, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, does it sound like the first application you're going with this is in the industry that you're discussing before?
It seemed like the most glaring like application to it.
I just like thinking of how niche crypto is still, but I think the idea with like an artist like Crypto Graffiti and who makes memes on a regular basis, it starts putting those things out, and then people start. I think the idea could take off to a place where you could move.
And there's so many different ways you could apply this. I mean, like a Spank Trade is doing crypto titties, but it's not. They don't pixelate it at all. They just like people tip, right? And other ways I've seen, like, I was thinking you could do like a Gmask, for example, which is like a way of obfuscating images while maintaining their content. So it could be like a puzzle, and it gets progressively less hard as you move on. Or it could even have like a private key in it somehow. You know, if someone wants to like figure it out.
Yeah, and there's all the big things with the puzzles, the $1 million website. Collaborative artistic stuff is interesting, and I think if you put it in the right place, it could definitely take off.
Yeah. So I guess I just remember what I was thinking about with the payments. Like the largest website for distributing video content on your own, if you own these videos, are like they take 20%, which is a lot. Like PayPal takes like what, like 2%, 1%. That's ridiculous. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
One last question. Looks like we're going to move on to the next. Are you planning on like the payments going directly to the content creator, or would you take a cut?
Oh no, I feel like this isn't open source. I don't feel proud enough of it. But like, you know, it's such a simple concept. But like, I mean, the only cut that anyone takes is crypto payments or whatever. Yeah. So I mean, but eventually with Spank, we'll get 100% basically. I don't know if there's a fee with that. I'm not exactly sure how that works because I haven't used it yet. It's in beta. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.